Good evening and welcome to Crawley Borough Council's Cabinet of the 3rd of September. I'm Councillor Michael Jones, Leader of the Council and Chair of the Cabinet. There are no scheduled fire drills tonight, so in the event of the fire alarm sounding, please leave the building via the main spiral staircase and through the main reception doors. Once outside, please turn left and make your way to the fire assembly point, located beyond the multi-storey car park on Exchange Road. If you're unable to use the stairs, please wait in the council chamber and you'll be guided by a member of the staff to the evacuation lift. This meeting is being live streamed via the council's YouTube channel. Please note that there is a no comments function available as part of this webcasting. The council is a data controller and we will retain the data collected during this webcast. This will be done so in accordance with the council's published data retention policy. Any members of the public seated in the public gallery should be aware that by entering the chamber, they're consenting to their image being captured by the automated camera system. Recordings will be used for webcasting and or training purposes. Councillors are reminded to take note of what is displayed on the screens in the room, as this shows what is being recorded and webcast. Cameras are currently set to capture you in seated positions, so please remain seated when speaking. You can request to speak as usual in committees by raising your hand, to speak by pressing the button with a face on it, and the microphone will go green when you are live. We will now commence with apologies for absence. Have we received any apologies for absence? I think we're all here, so probably not, no. Okay, disclosures of interest. Does any member have any disclosures of interest? Councillor Noyce.
Yes, I've got pecuniary interest in item 6.
Thank you, Councillor Noyce. So we come to the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of July. Does the Cabinet agree that the minutes are an accurate record of the meetings? Is that agreed? Thank you. Public question time. We have 15 minutes for public question time. I'll invite each person in turn to the table at the front of the public seating area to ask their question, which must be a question, not a statement, and be related to the functions of the Cabinet. It must not relate to an individual case or duplicate in essence a question which has been put to the Cabinet in the past 6 months. If you could state your name, which ward you live in, and then ask your question. I will then invite other councillors or officers to respond, or I may respond myself. You may then ask one supplementary question which should relate to your original question or the response given to it. Would anyone like to ask a question? Mr. Taylor? Yep. If you want to come forward to the table.
Thank you, Chair. Cabinet papers show £834,000 of hostel savings already assumed in the 25-26 budget. Why wasn't this shown as a contingent item as SIPFA guidance requires?
I think this would be a question for one of our finance officers to answer. And I think they're not seated at the table at the moment. I think we can get an answer in writing sent to you, Mr. Taylor, on that. Sorry, I mean I can. Our head of finance.
No, I'm just saying, can we get a definition of the question, please? Hostel savings, perhaps a page reference.
So what you'd like me to refer to the actual budget?
If it's possible to refer to a specific item.
Yeah, I'm happy to refer to that. In the 25-26 budget and council tax report, section 6.9, the TA recovery line explicitly includes hostel rents.
Okay, is that? I'm guessing that should be a specific enough reference for the finance officers.
Yeah. Whilst I appreciate the offer of input from one of these officers, it is a cabinet approved budget. So can I ask you whether the Cabinet formally signed off those savings before planning consent was granted for 6 to 9 Ifield Road?
I'm being advised that specific planning matters I can't give you an answer on because they're a function of the planning committee, not a function of the Cabinet.
Yeah, and you can't talk about individual
and I can't talk about an individual case.
And full council signs off the budget, not.
And it is full council that signs off the budget, not the cabinet. The cabinet only agrees for it to go to full council.
But my question is about governance. You know, why weren't the 834k of hostel savings shown as a contingent item as SIPFA requires?
Okay. Well, what I'm going to have to say is that I will arrange for a written answer to your question to be addressed to you, because that requires a level of the technical answer that I'll have to get our finance officers to give to you.
Okay, well, thank you.
Okay. I mean, I will allow you a supplementary question because I think that was just clarifying.
I mean, my questions are really about the budget and the fact that I spent a little bit of time looking through the budgets that are available on the Crawley.gov site, just trying to sort of understand a little bit about what's happened in the last week or so. So really, the purpose of coming here was just to try and get a straight answer from the cabinet as to where these figures come from, because I don't believe that you don't have the answer to this question. You know, if you've already built in the actual costs that the revenue that you expect to generate from your hostel accommodation, it should be a fairly straight answer. Either it's a contingent, it either goes into a contingent fund.
Okay, well, with
or
the
it's part
greatest
of
of
the budget.
respect, what you've specifically asked, as I understood it, was why this isn't in accordance with SIPFA guidance.
Yes, that's correct.
Well, I will have to refer that to one of our financial experts because it's a technical question. I think, thank you. I mean, but that's probably as far as we can take that
Yeah.
for tonight.
Could I, sorry, if we just
Well-
avoid the technical guidance, can we
Well-
have a straight answer as to whether you've actually accounted for this revenue?
We've approved something that we've had advice, solid advice in terms of what we've agreed to. So I think there's not. I can't give you any more answer than that now.
You'll respond to the question that was put originally.
Sorry.
You'll respond in writing to the question.
I'll respond in writing to the question that you asked originally.
It was going to be passed.
I'm going to send to you later when I've been able to clarify the point. But because I don't want, I can't be pressed on this now because I need to get clarification on it myself. Okay.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much for giving me as much information as you have.
Thank you. Was there any other public questions? I'm not seeing any, so in that case, we'll move on. Matters referred to the Cabinet and any report from the Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. As normal, Councillor Russell, I'll bring you in during each item which has been referred from the Commission. So we move on to item 6, which is we will start by considering the civil penalties and rent repayment orders policy 2025. Oh yes, well, just note Councillor Noyce is not participating in this item, but we will call him back at the end of the item. Councillor Irvine, although strictly speaking not the portfolio holder, very kindly stepped in for this because Councillor Yasmin Khan was indisposed on Monday. So Councillor Irvine, if you'd like to introduce him.
Thank you, Chair. This is a report that didn't go to the Overview and Scrutiny Commission on Monday night. And basically, we've had legislation in place for a while now, allowing local authorities to pursue civil penalties of up to £30,000 as an alternative to prosecution. And in Appendix A, it lists out a long set of examples of possible breaches for which a civil penalty can be imposed instead of prosecution. Thankfully, we've got the report author here tonight, Chris Modder, who can probably explain it much further. And I'd just like to say that this approach has also been adopted by Horsham District Council and Mid Sussex District Council. So we will have a kind of continuity of practice across North Sussex. So with that, I'll see if Chris wants to say anything.
Chris, did you want to add anything at this point? Or?
Not particularly. I mean, we've got the report as presented and as written, so I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
That's fine. Thanks very much. Councillor Crowe.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I know Councillor Noyce has declared a pecuniary interest and left the meeting, though he didn't actually say what that was for. I welcome this policy. It gives the council another tool, another option to crack down on those on private landlords who may be breaking the law and not treating their tenants as they should be doing, as we'd all like to see. So I very much welcome the policy and presume it will be applied with common sense. And but there's a wider point as well. I welcome the alignment with Horsham and Mid Sussex, and that actually got me thinking a bit further. In that now that the Reigate nonsense has been rightly thrown out by the government, we know that Horsham and Mid Sussex we are going to be in the same local authority with them as a minimum. We'll either be with them, or we'll be with them in Ada, or we'll be with them in the rest of the counties. So we know that it's going to happen. So I think it sort of says to me, let's also look at the period between when we make our submission in September, later this month, for local government reorganisation, between a quite lengthy period between that and when we actually hear back from the government some point next year as to what our new council will look like. Let's see where we can sensibly align with other local authorities, particularly our two neighbours in the north, on various policies. Because I think we all have a duty it's going to be a very tumultuous time for local government over the next few years, and I think we have a duty to try and make that, all of us, to make that transition as smooth as possible. So I see this as hopefully perhaps the first step in many steps where we can align operational policies certainly across the northern areas as a minimum in many areas, to help make so we're not sort of or our successors are not having to do too much when that new authority comes into being. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. As it stands, we're still an existing authority for the next two or 3 years, and so I'm more than happy for us to concentrate on what we think are the right arrangements for the borough as it stands. But rather than tying ourselves up in knots with local government reorganisation, I hope it's not going to be mentioned for every item tonight. We'll be here all night. But okay, thank you for making that point anyway. Right. I'll now open the debate for other cabinet members. I see Councillor Hilton first and Councillor Sue Mullins.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. It's pretty clear that this legislation has been in place, but obviously because of case law and the scale of mitigation, etc., it's had to be modified in line with other authorities. My question is on 6.2. In a way, it's good news that it's not being. It's seen. It sounds like it's used as a last resort, and obviously the team and the private sector housing team must do some enforcement work. So this is a good tool to use, but I'd be quite interested to see the kind of level of work and whether there's a scope for using it more. Because in my book, I've got a professional compliance background. That any tools, if we've got it at our disposal in the toolbox, we should use it. So it'd be quite interesting what other measures we use before we get there. And it's a sign of success that we don't have to use it, but it could be seen the other way, that if we don't use it, why aren't we using it?
Thank you, Councillor Hilton. I think what I'll do is I'll let the Cabinet make their points, and if there's anything a Cabinet member or Chris Modder wants to come back on, then happy to respond then. Councillor Sue Mullins.
Thank you. I really welcome this report. I think it's a very important one for Crawley, because we have more and more HMOs within our boundaries, and I'm very happy that we are now aligning ourselves with other areas, Reigate and well, we just said Horsham and Reigate. I just wondered if there's any government guidance on how we operate this and whether we're bringing in the same sort of rules right across the country, because I would have thought most towns are affected in some way or other with HMO problems, and there's an awful lot of media talk and a lot out there about what goes on with HMOs and the problems that they cause everywhere. I mean, I was very interested to see the Portsmouth experience, that they brought in much stronger rules on HMOs. I know they have a huge student population down there, which makes some difference, but I would have thought the same rules should apply everywhere, to make sure that people are living in any of these HMOs anywhere have the same experience and have the same standard of living. So I'd like to know if there's any move from the government in any way to have a sort of like legislation that applies to everyone. So rather than individual councils having to pick it up and say, we'll do it this way or that way, whether there is sort of guidance out there for it.
It's not strictly related to the setting of the civil penalties and rent repayment orders, but it is on the wider issue of the regulation of the private sector rental sector. So, Chris, would you like to respond on any of the points, or Ian?
Yeah, I can respond first to Councillor Hilton. With regards to the levels of enforcement, or what the private sector housing team do with regards to housing conditions and HMO licensing, the private sector housing team, we deal with the enforcement under the Housing Act 2004, and there are a number of other pieces of housing legislation, harassment, illegal eviction, or protection from unlawful eviction, and that we have powers to take enforcement action under. We do work with landlords. Initially, when we try to get resolution through cooperation, depending on the severity of what we find when we inspect properties. If the property is in such a dilapidated and hazardous condition, we may choose then just to go straight to formal enforcement. But thankfully in Crawley, because of the nature of the housing stock in Crawley, that's not often the case, but it can be, so we don't rule that out. We serve enforcement notices, everything that was included in the report. So improvement notices are the most common form of action if we find there are hazards in a property that require a landlord to to address and mitigate. Then an improvement notice is generally the approach that we take, and then if we only look at civil penalties and potentially prosecution if there's a failure to comply with the notices that are served. What I would say is civil penalties, the nature of the offence, it's a criminal offence, so any burden of proof has to be to the criminal standard. So it's not a quick process, to carry out the investigations, to collate the evidence, potentially get cooperation from tenants who may or may not be willing to cooperate depending on their circumstances. So it can be a tricky task to deal with, but that's the kind of approach that we take. With regards to Councillor Mullins, the penalties policy and the report, it's not solely with regards to HMOs, but there is an element of HMO regulation included in the policy. There is government guidance with regards to the civil penalties. It's included in the report that all local authorities have to have regard for when we consider the offence and we consider the level of any penalty that we give notice that we intend to impose. There are schemes that councils can adopt in addition to the mandatory HMO licensing scheme. So local authorities have the power to introduce additional HMO licensing, which could can cover sort of single family dwellings as well as other forms of HMOs, so smaller HMOs, because a property isn't licensable unless you have 5 or more people forming 2 or more households sharing basic amenities. But the Housing Act 2004 does give local authorities the option to introduce licensing schemes for other forms of accommodation. You have to have justification for that. So that might be if there's areas of deprivation or properties that are hard to let, or whether there's areas that are significant issues with antisocial behaviour. So there's a number of factors that get taken into account before local authorities can introduce those schemes. But there are other options available.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chris Mullins.
Got the wrong button. Just a thought from the discussion we've just been having, and that's, do our officers have a right of entry, or do we have to be invited in to inspect this property? Because I do understand, I've had cases where the tenants are very nervous about involving the council in circumstances that are not satisfactory, and I've heard the council officers often back off if they if the tenants themselves are not all that cooperative. But nevertheless, I mean, some of the circumstances that we hear about are quite bad and maybe health affecting. So do we have any right of entry into those properties regardless of the residents in there or the ownership of it?
Yeah, local authorities are obliged to provide notice of an inspection under Section 239 of the Housing Act 2004. That requires the local authority to provide at least 24 hours notice. So some local authorities choose to serve notice. Other local authorities, like ourselves, will give notice. So you can give notice by email or by telephone conversation to the landlord. It needs to be the person who's the landlord or the person who's in control of the property. What can happen, we can serve notice or we can give notice with our intention to inspect the property and gain access. Sometimes that access isn't forthcoming, so you end up turning up, you knock on the door, nobody answers the door. We don't force our way in on that occasion. Similarly, we don't get into a confrontational situation with residents that might be putting officers at risk. If we subsequently think we require access, we can apply to the magistrate and get a warrant for access, in the same way that environmental health officers and planning officers can do that. So there are different options.
Thanks very much for that. I don't see anyone else looking to speak, so I mean, I absolutely think it's right that there's an up-to-date policy in place to cover this important subject, which, you know, is there to protect the welfare of a large number of our residents in the borough who live in such private accommodation. So that's absolutely right. I'd just like to clarify the need for recommendation 2.1c on page 11 of the pack, which delegates the future revision of the policy to the head of strategic planning. I'm just wondering why we wouldn't want this to come back to Cabinet if such a decision to change the policy was needed. Presumably we aren't talking about this needing to happen very often. So I suppose I'm asking the officers here really for whether that. I mean, I'm prepared to be persuaded to keep it in, but just I'm just wondering if we're expecting this to change on that frequent a basis that we wouldn't want it to come back.
I think it's more to cover minor changes rather than bring back policy, because we brought back the major policy.
Okay, so we're saying very minor changes if this was to be used. Is that okay?
It's more that, but obviously, like, sorry, I think normally the case, I think the last time we brought this back was, we have brought it back before, but there are a number of changes that may need to be done during the year, during the time, so it gives us the flexibility, Chair, to let the head of service in consultation with the cabinet member to make minor or reasonably minor changes, and then significant ones if the cabinet member feels he should come back, and we'll bring it back.
Okay.
So happy with that.
Okay, is everyone happy with that? Yeah, I think that seems to be the case. In that case, I move that the Cabinet approves the recommendations as set out in 2.1 of page 11 of the agenda pack, with a slight change that in recommendation C, that the term Cabinet Member of Housing be replaced with the Cabinet Member for Public Protection, as this delegation would fall within their portfolio. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Irvine, on this occasion. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you, Cabinet. Yes, if someone could bring Councillor Noyce back into the room, please. Thank you, Chris. Right. It appears Councillor Noyce has moved further away from the committee chamber than was possibly advisable. But no, here he is. Yeah. In that case, we'll move on to. Councillor Noyce has been pointed out. It's just going to clarify the nature of his pecuniary interest that he's declared.
Yeah, for item 6, it's because I'm a landlord. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Noyce. Item 7, we'll now move on to consider the Crawley Homes Domestic Abuse Policy Report. Councillor Irvine to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, and as the Cabinet knows, Crawley Homes has been embarking on a programme of pulling our existing policy together into one document per policy. We've been doing that for some months. This document is the culmination of looking at our domestic abuse policy, which also meets the requirements of the Social Housing Regulation Act 2023. I have Claire Prosser, the report author, here to answer any questions and also detail what the policy sets out. But I'd just like to say, we did discuss this the other day on Monday night, I believe, at the Overview and Scrutiny Commission, and without preempting what the chair of the commission is going to say, I did leave that meeting very, very pleased with the support that the OSC gave to this. There were quite a few questions, all constructive, and I think we can safely say that we've got the backing of the council on this. But I'll leave it to Councillor Russell to say what the commission thought of it.
Thank you, Councillor Irvine. That brings us very neatly to Councillor Russell to present the Commission's comments.
Thank you, Chair. You've got the comments overview and sheets, the comments and recommendations, but there are a few that I will just like to draw out. The Oversight and Scrutiny Commission were given the background and the context of the policy, and our understanding, as articulated again just now, is essentially an articulation of much of the work that Crawley Homes had already been doing, but was centralising it into a single document to ensure that all the statutory requirements are covered. At the meeting at the OSC, we recognised the complexities of and the delicacies of the subject matter of domestic abuse, and in these situations, how difficult it can be. We questioned officers on some of the arrangements, and those are detailed in there, so I won't duplicate what you already have in front of you. I will say, though, that it was useful to have it clarified on bullet point 6, where you see clarification sought, that actually it is Crawley Homes will refer to other agencies, and this policy is about highlighting and helping staff, front-facing staff, to spot and observe where there may be issues and concerns are raised, that they can then forward on to other agencies. And as said, I think it would be fair to say that the Oversight and Scrutiny Commission was very complimentary of the policy and thanked the presenting officer for their diligence and efforts with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. I'll now open the debate for other Cabinet members. Councillor Sue Mullins.
I really will. always forget. I really welcome this report. I think it's very important that we have a policy in place and that our staff are well trained in any of these situations. I mean, very often with domestic abuse, everybody knows it's going on, everybody knows it's happening, but nobody reports it. Everybody knows, but they don't talk to each other. So I think it's really important that everyone who's involved is well trained and knows who they should be passing any information on to, and also how they handle that information, because it can be very, very sensitive and people can be in a great deal of danger if it isn't handled properly. I mean, we all know that the police, the social services, the NHS and educational establishments all need to be involved, but it's how that's brought together and who's responsible for making sure that all those people know what's going on and make sure that the person who's at the centre of it all is protected. And not just protected, but their family, their children are also protected. Because it's a well-known thing down the years of so many families, these things go on behind closed doors and nobody knows what's happening. And it's not just the one person who's affected, but those children have their lives destroyed for many, many years because it's gone on around them or affected them for their whole of their lives, and it affects their future. So I'm really pleased that we are taking this really seriously and looking at it very carefully and making sure that our staff are well trained and know exactly what to do in every circumstance and how to spot the signs, because it's not always easy, because people are very ashamed to admit that there's something wrong and there's something not the way it should be and things are going wrong with their relationship or wrong within their family. So I really do welcome this, and thank you very much for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Councillor Mullins. Any other comments? Not seeing... Oh, Councillor Chris Mullins, yeah.
Quickly, I mean, I've got to say this. I remember years ago when we had a refuge in Crawley and Sue was involved with the women's group at the refuge. And she used to come home and tell me about, not detailed names or anything, but about some of the cases and what the families went through and the terrifying circumstances in which they lived. And it was very sad to hear that. I mean, we had women that used to come halfway across the country to escape from the circumstances in which they found themselves. It could be very awful. But it often took them a long time to work up the courage to do that. They were frightened. The only home security they had was the one they were in, and the income sources or whatever it was that they had. And it was a massive decision for maybe a mother with 2 or 3 children to take that decision, to take a stand and to ask for help. And that's the real worry about it all. I appreciate this legislation here, and it's important. But I really think that I regret the loss of our refuge, because we used to have a refuge here that was very, very important, and it was an easy escape bolt for a lot of these families. But this is important. But this is a terrible thing that goes on, and I feel frightened for some of these people in these circumstances.
Thank you, Councillor Mullins. Any other... I don't see anyone else wanting to speak. Ian, do you want to come back? I'm going to finish. I'll finish off with something, but yeah, if you want to reply, yeah.
I just want to thank everybody for the support.
Thank you, Ian. Sorry, Councillor Irvine. This is one of the remaining policies that needs to be approved. There's been the whole raft of them recently. It's been through public consultation, I believe, and as now with some amendments following that consultation come to us at Cabinet for approval. Aside from statutory requirements, we take our role as a social landlord extremely seriously and the welfare of our tenants. I would also mention that the Council and the Safer Crawley Partnership also take domestic abuse extremely seriously wherever it occurs across the borough, and look to both prevention of incidents and help for anyone who's become a victim. But this in particular tonight is about our Crawley Homes tenants. I was personally pleased to see that in all of this as social landlords, we will above all be putting the welfare of the victim first. But we'll also be ready to take proportionate action against any tenant or licence holder who is perpetrating such actions when it is clear that it is safe to do so. Now, call me old-fashioned if you want, but I've always been of the view that anyone who is a council tenant has a privilege that has a real value in this day and age, and one that can and should be forfeited if the behaviour falls below a certain standard, and this whole area is certainly one of them. So it is good to see this reviewed and refreshed, and I fully support it. So on that basis, I move that the Cabinet approves the recommendations as set out in 2.2 on page 45 of the agenda pack. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Khan. Is that agreed? Thank you. We move on to the next item, which is to consider the Crawley Homes Complaints Report and Service Improvement Plan. This now also includes a supplementary agenda report, CH/229A, detailing the comparison of yearly complaints. Councillor Irvine, would you like to present the report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, I think this is our second annual complaints report, and I'm very pleased to say that it shows quite a large improvement on our complaints performance of previous years. For example, we now have a 31% improvement on stage 1 complaints completed within timescale. Stage 2 has dropped back just a very small amount, 4%, but that's not really a great deal for concern. And as you can see from Appendix A, there's a whole raft of improvements which we've either made or are intending to make. And the only one that is still outstanding and showing as red is the recruitment of a complaints manager. And as I said the other night, the Overview and Scrutiny Commission, that seems to be because no one wants the job. Having said that, we did discuss it at length at the Overview and Scrutiny Commission the other night, and again, without preempting what Councillor Russ is going to say, I was very pleased that the Commission was very supportive. Made some very good points that I hadn't thought of, and I left the meeting feeling that everyone's behind us on our journey towards improving our complaints performance. With that, I'll leave it there, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Irvine. I'll bring in Councillor Russell to present the Commission's comments.
Thank you, Chair. The Oversight and Scrutiny Commission, again, looked at this, and you have many of the issues that were raised and brought up on the document in front of you. We noted a significant improvement in complaints handling despite a rising volume, which I think it is worth stressing is typical across the sector and not isolated to Crawley Homes. It's an issue that's been seen across many areas of social housing. Crawley Homes, as has been explained, we were advised is looking into the methodology of handling complaints, particularly in the light of the rising number, and that's been alluded to with trying to organise a complaints manager. The Oversight and Scrutiny Commission requested the volume of Stage 1 and Stage 2 year on year be provided in these ongoing presentations, and that's been agreed to, and I can see that in the supplementary agenda here. We also noted the recent judgment of the regulator for social housing and of the good complaint management and oversight. And I think probably the key thing I would say is that was recognised at the meeting was the impressive approach of Crawley Homes and the desire for continuing and ongoing improvement in this area. And that was warmly welcomed by the meeting. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. I'll now open the debate for other Cabinet members. Councillor Hilton, to begin.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm grateful for the comments of Councillor Russell, which gives us a further assurance that we're on the right way. I think one of the most important stats here is that, in terms of figures, there was 34,000 repairs last year during this period. And in terms of Stage 1 complaints, there's 349 Stage 1 complaints. Out of that, it's 299. Now, although it could easily be argued that one complaint is too much, at the same time, we've heard how the sector's increased, complaints have increased for various reasons, and we know about the pressures under both the tenants and actually people working within the sector. So, and that balance between managing expectations and outcomes, the complaints are going to come. But I think that stat of only having 1% of complaints out of 34,010 repairs in our 8,000 is testimony of the good work and our recognition. I thought the report was really good, recognising where there's issues, wanting to put them right, and was open and transparent in the way it does things. I also think that I'm not just taking the report's word for it. I think two important things was that the social housing regulator, as I noted, was told to the OSC, were very pleased with the methodology of what goes on. And really, although the outcome is important and important that we deal with these issues to deal with as a result of either stage 1 and stage 2, we deal with it, it's also the methodology and the process. And it sounds like in terms of complaints handling, we're on the right tracks. And secondly, in terms of the Tenants Leasehold Action Panel, TLAP, they seem to be pleased with the process of handling, particularly in relation to stage 1 complaints. And I do think it's been quite a difficult time because I know from I've seen one complaint myself, and it's not just a question of I haven't done my repair. There are some quite complex issues involved, and particularly when it's a crossover between leaseholders and repairs complaints. And I just lost my train of thought. And I think with leaseholder complaints, I think it's been particularly interesting over the last year because obviously there's been a lot of right-to-buy applications, and that's put a lot of pressure on the leaseholder team. And I think that has been recognised in the report as well. So although you can congratulate on getting complaints, I think we're on the right track. So well done for the report.
Thank you, Councillor Hilton. Do I have any other councillors? Councillor Irvine.
Well, I just want to thank everyone, Chair, again for their support. And I'm glad Councillor Hilton mentioned TLAP, the Tenants and Leaseholders Action Panel, because they did put a lot of work into this, and they do their work on a completely voluntary basis. And I sometimes think they get their work gets a bit, not exactly overlooked, but they're there, but they don't get sometimes the credit they deserve. So I'd just like to put on record my thanks to them for their work on this. And also, just on the issue of complaints, I mean, a complaint isn't necessarily a bad thing because it gives you an opportunity to show how you can resolve a complaint, and also sometimes a complaint can highlight an issue which you're not aware of, and it can help an organisation to improve. So with that, I mean, it sounds to me like Crawley Homes is getting a pat on the back, and if it is, I'm happy about that, and I'm also happy to accept it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Irvine. I don't see any other cabinet members indicating. So, yep, just to thank everyone for their contributions to the discussion tonight on this undeniably important subject. It is no surprise in a housing provider of the size of Crawley Homes that not everything goes to plan. Sometimes communications either break down or something is not understood by either the council, the contractors, or the tenant, as well as we might all like. I suppose I'm saying there are a lot of moving parts, and in particular, it's no surprise that the majority of complaints are related to the repair service because of that. I will make the point that as far as repairs go, the number of complaints amount to less than 1% of all the overall repairs that are done annually. I think my maths is correct, but there has been customer journey mapping, and I know the officers have supported TLAP in looking at the whole tenant's experience with that. Now, looking at the timescales for responses for complaints, I would rather focus on the positives and accentuate the negatives. we would ideally like responses to be 100% within the service standards, but I think we all know through experience that there are some, for whatever reason, seem to become intractable or get delayed for any number of reasons. And I am heartened in particular to see that stage 1 complaints response times have steeply improved in the past year, and I'll be even more pleased if by next year they're nearer the response rates of stage 2 complaints, which, although the response rate has fallen very slightly this year, still seems a very solid rate to me. I believe this is a particularly good performance because I understand that the time constraints for responses has also tightened as well. I might be wrong on that, but I look to be corrected if I've misinterpreted that. I'm seeing. Amanda, would you like to clarify?
Yeah, so this year, the Housing Ombudsman Code includes the requirement to contact the resident within 5 working days to understand the complaint. Now, that didn't used to be part of the overall timescale. We had to respond within 10 days, but this year that's also now brought into the calculation. So if we don't get the initial 5-day contact right and we don't get that done on time, then even if the overall complaint is within 10 days, we've still failed the overall contact. So it has changed and it is tougher this year.
Thank you. That's along the lines of what I thought. So thank you. So ultimately, just the message I think we want to give to everyone is we are committed to high standards for our tenants and leaseholders, and I believe that this report and action plan shows that we are far from complacent or resting on our laurels, and that this is part of the whole journey that Crawley Homes is going on, one that is seeing increasingly good performance, and in part, I would say, argue was recognised in our recent rating from the Regulator for Social Housing. So I would support the recommendations and for the report to be published. So I move on that basis that the Cabinet approves the recommendations as set out in 2.2 on page 71 of the agenda pack and note report CH/229A. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Irving, thank you very much. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you, Cabinet. We will move on to consider the financial outturn 2024 to 25 quarter 4 reports, and I am to present that. And in doing so, I have great pleasure in presenting the final revenue and capital outturn for the year, ending the 31st of March 2025, highlighting key variances and giving an update on reserves. Cabinet members will have been aware more than most that robust budget management and careful reserve management was necessary during 24-25 to keep above the £3 million recommended minimum balance recommended by the Council. The outturn for 24-25 is significantly favourable against the original budget by about £1.43 million. This is despite, since the budget being set in 2024, the Council facing a number of significant challenges. The general cross pressures, including expenditure on homelessness with temporary accommodation, continue to increase during the year. The commercial property sector is also facing challenges which resulted in an adverse outturn in this area. The Council has benefited from increased investment income, which, together with careful reserve management, enabled a contribution of £367,000 to be made to the general fund balance. The key financial outcomes are the general fund outturn is £918,000 more favourable. Net service expenditure, we had £1.566 million adverse, mitigated by a favourable variance from investment income of £2.484 million. And there was careful management of the earmarked reserves, which allowed an additional amount to be added to the general fund balance, which closed at £4.177 million, which was an improvement of £1.432 million against the original budget of £2.745 million. I can say that I'm extremely pleased with this result, which leaves us in a solid financial position, and is a tribute to the financial prudence of this Labour administration and the advice and expertise from our council officers. While this leaves us in a solid place, I would still need to acknowledge we need to be vigilant, and that if financial pressures were to worsen, we are still not in a wholly predictable position. We know that changes are coming with the Fairer Funding Review and the business rates reset, but we face those uncertainties at least from a solid base. Addressing the major variances, adverse, our investment properties, the full year void costs of Ashdown House came to £625,000. It was necessary to keep the plant within the building running, which necessitated regular servicing and monthly monitoring, as well as some other maintenance and repair work. Cabinet members know the arguments and the benefits for the local economy and small and medium-sized enterprises when we achieve our goals with Ashdown House. If it were not for the RAC issue, which has added some unpredictability to the entire project, we would perhaps have already been there. We could certainly have done without the expense, but sometimes it is worth spending a little more to do the right thing. In terms of operational properties, these generate well over £5 million each year for the council. These properties are subject to an element of turnover for tenants, rent reviews and lease renewals, which can be at less than favourable terms than expected, and meant that there was an overall shortfall in anticipated income and void costs for the year amounting to £511,000. We hope this level will not be as high as this at the end of this financial year. As far as temporary accommodation is concerned, homelessness continues to be a significant pressure, and the cost of TA exceeded budget by £1.58 million. However, this was offset by grants and subsidy recovery. We still need the government to unfreeze the housing benefit subsidy cap from 2011 rent levels, but because we had more grants in the last year, this has helped limit our exposure, which is welcome and deserves genuine credit. But future grants, of course, are not guaranteed, so a resolution of the underlying funding issue is still required as well. In terms of favourable variances, we had 108,000 underspend on corporate IT licences as a result of the rationalisation of licences. That's very welcome. And of course, as I just mentioned earlier, the investment interest, the net additional interest received for the year was £2.484 million, due partly to slippage in the capital programme, but mostly to sound management of our cash, to which I'm sure the Cabinet will want to join with me in thanking our officers once again for an excellent performance. As far as the housing revenue account's concerned, the final overspend was £2.656 million. The repairs outturn was £1.15 million over budget, despite the budget increasing for 24-25 by £2 million. But this was due to the volume of repairs being over 1,000 more than in 23-24. As a point of principle, we continue to prioritise responsive repairs when these are needed for our tenants, something which I think, as I said earlier on, is at least part reflected in our recent satisfactory rating from the regulator for social housing for Crawley homes. And with the stock condition survey that's moving forward, we can move to more planned maintenance in the future, being we aspire to be more proactive and efficient with it. The HRA working balance was increased by £1.763 million to £5 million to reflect a prudent level of reserves for the size of the HRA that we have at this council, the recommended level being between 7 to 10% of rental value. In terms of our capital programme, the budget was £46.938 million and our actual spend was £33.491 million. I can concede that there's been some slippage in the capital programme with just under £12 million being moved to future years. Some of this has been beyond our control because water neutrality and its restrictions still cast a long shadow. As far as reserves are concerned, as I said, the General Fund Reserve has increased our working balance to £4.177 million and as I said, £5 million for the HRA reserves. Our major repairs reserve has decreased due to loan repayment and capital spend. So the recommendations are: Cabinet notes the outturn and carry forward requests, and full council approves reserve transfers and capital programme adjustments. The one thing to remark on as a practical action from the recommendations on this item is to allow the use of the additional £158,000 from the government, more than we expected, to help help eligible disabled and older people to make home adaptations to help them to continue living in their chosen homes, which I'm sure we would all welcome. So on that basis, I'll bring in Councillor Russell to present the Commission's comments. Thank you, Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chair. As yourself, the OSC welcomed the good news of the 24-25 significant favourable outturn, despite the ongoing pressures, and that was acknowledged. It was stressed, though, obviously, and has been accepted by yourself, the need for ongoing vigilance. That was discussed and talked through. Another issue that was talked about, and everything pretty much is in the notes that you have, all of you. The capital programme slippage was interrogated, and we felt that largely satisfactory answers were received, and those are bullet points 3 and 4 of the papers that you have. Other issues that were interrogated were the underspend of garages, with some concern being expressed to make sure that those were maintained at a high level and not allowed to fall into disrepair. And also the definitions of operational priorities was explained to the OSC. Sorry, yeah, operational priorities explained to the OSC. The OSC did recognise the excellent work in the investment income that had been produced, and I would like to share what I think was the fun phrase of the evening from Councillor Lanza, who referred to this as almost defying gravity, the wonderful work which had been done in raising that income, which was brilliant. And the OSC did acknowledge that as well. And I think what's also the last thing I'll mention is that the OSC also noted the ongoing work marketing the Create building, but you have a summary of our discussion points there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. I mean, I have to say, as far as the garage is concerned, I've already started looking into that to satisfy myself that our maintenance programme is fit for purpose. I'm fairly confident I will be given such reassurances, but that is being looked at. But thank you for that. Councillor Crowe.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, Councillor Lanza might have talked about, or my colleague Councillor Lanza might have talked about defying gravity, so maybe I might just bring you back down to earth just a little bit. But first of all, actually, this was a better read than what I was expecting. So I certainly will congratulate the work of the officers in the greater returns in not only the investment interest, but also the overall improved outturn compared to what we were expecting. But let's be clear, it's despite of the Labour administration rather than because of it. And we'll just make that point. But the figure for the investment interest of 1.931 million, that is a huge amount, and that is really good. And obviously, I'd much rather it was this way around, that the forecasting wasn't good and we've got the extra interest, rather than the forecasting was good and we didn't have it. But the fact still remains that this is a huge amount more than what we expected. And what I don't recall is, what I'd like to know is, when did this become apparent? Because I don't recall from previous budget monitoring reports seeing anything like this kind of figure expected. And surely that would have been known earlier in the financial year. Like I say, I do welcome the extra amount. And I note from a couple of years ago when I raised my concerns about the then underperforming, as I saw it, of the interest returns compared to what was available out there, how that has been turned around. And we can talk about cause and effect. I wouldn't like to take too much credit, but I still note the difference. But I recognise as well that we're now locked into some good returns, and those returns are really fantastic to see, and long may that continue. If we turn to page 136 of the report, and paragraph 5.6.3, and we've not yet had the new burdens funding from the government to help fund and pay for our new Chagosian arrivals, and we've not had this now for 2 financial years. So we're now into our third year, and the figure is 3.06 million. And while the report says that we are likely to receive that, I really do hope that is the case, because Rachel Reeves is fast running out of other people's money at the Treasury, and I would hate to see the situation deteriorate where actually sorry Gov, we ain't got that money for you now. So I really would encourage every effort to ensure we get that money as soon as possible, given that it's 3.606 million already, and I don't know what it would be for this upcoming financial year. And then finally, just comment. There's been some comment already on the capital programme slippage, and yes, that is a significant slippage. Although there are reasonable reasons for that. But it just reminded me of, I think it wasn't the previous year's budget, it was probably a couple of budgets before that, where the Conservative Group put forward an amendment to allow some slippage in the capital programme to actually help to generate some extra income for the council, and that was not adopted at the time. And yet here we have an example of the capital programme slipping, and the council benefiting financially as a result. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. I think I'll just respond at this point. I mean, one of the reasons I didn't personally care for the gravity-defying description from Councillor Lanza on Monday is that none of this happens by magic, which that sort of expression seems to sort of imply it does. Not just good performance by investment team, but I'd like to think sound political decisions as well.
Sorry, Chair. Could I just say I don't want to introduce too much levity in that. I may have made a mistake in that.
That's fine. It's not a criticism of you.
And it certainly, with regard to something that you mentioned, Councillor Crowe, we did interrogate some of those details on bullet point 3, and I would hate that I might have dropped a colleague in it.
No, he said that. But I mean, I think as far as the question relating to investment, the honest and most straightforward answer to this is that the investment incomes remained higher for longer than was anticipated. And this is all in the report, I think, and the Treasury Management Report. Page 149. Yeah, and page 149, I'm told. And the fact is that we are locked into more longer term arrangements than we originally thought. As far as the new burdens funding goes, we've been told by the Home Office we will be getting it this month. I have it on good authority, i.e. they've written to us with that confirmation. And absolutely we're pleased to hear that. And I can assure Councillor Crowe I'll be following it up very assertively if that doesn't prove to be the case. But in terms of the reference back to the budget amendment, I mean, my view's always been that you don't deliberately slip the capital programme, because too much of that can happen without deliberate reasoning to do it. And of course, actually, I think most of us are satisfied that the capital programme has very solid and worthwhile projects in it. The sooner we can deliver them, the better. But some of these reasons for what the slippage, they haven't slipped very far. They've moved a couple of quarters, or in some cases they're based on contract negotiations, which I haven't been told aren't in Part B yet. So I'm reluctant to go into any detail on them. So, but anyway, I'll finish there and open the debate for other cabinet members. Would anyone like to speak? Councillor Sue Mullins.
Thank you. As the leader has said, it's been an incredibly challenging year financially for this council, probably one of the most challenging years we've ever had. And I think great thanks are owed to our finance team, who we've had to guide us and advise us through what has been a very difficult and challenging time. I don't think it's just our finance officers either. I think our members as well. Each portfolio has been really scrutinised and looked at in absolute detail to see where any savings can be made. And we've all made absolute effort to protect the services that we provide for our residents. And I think overall we've managed to do that. There has been decisions we've had to make that we've not been happy with or comfortable with. But overall, I think we've managed to protect most of the things that our residents really rely on in this town. And most of our residents wouldn't even perhaps notice that much of a difference, even though we sat here agonising in very long meetings at times, making decisions. We've managed to protect our services, we've managed to protect our residents, and we've managed to protect our reserves, which at the beginning of the year really did look a bit challenging, as though we might not be able to do it. And we were told we had to stick at 3 million somehow or other, And to be able to come out at the end of it a lot better off is great. And it is great that we've got extra money coming in from our investments. And I'm quite happy to have it, Councillor Crowe, round this way, that the predictions at the beginning might have been a bit scary, but to come out at the end with the right answers and the right amounts of money in the bank is how we want it, not the other way round. I'm quite happy to have it this way round. So thank you very much to our officers for doing a great job for us for this year. And I hope they do a great one next year as well. No pressure.
Challenge.
Thank you, Councillor Mullins. Any other Councillor Irvine?
I just want to say, Chair, from a housing point of view, and I mean, to be honest with you, I think Councillor Crowe was having a bit of a dig there about, you know, it's in spite of a Labour council, not because of. I actually don't agree with that at all. If you knew the hours and the effort that we put in conjunction with the officers to try and produce a budget that actually works for the council and works for the town. And just on the housing front, I mean, often it's very difficult to set a budget because you're setting a budget for the year ahead and you just don't know what's going to happen in the future. For example, you could, on the housing repairs, you could have a massive storm. There could be a lot of damage to council houses. You can't predict that. And similarly with homelessness, we've known now for a number of years that homelessness has affected, been a great cost to our council finances, and that's why we're doing everything we can, as we did in the past, to try and make sure that people who have been made homeless in Crawley have access to reasonable temporary accommodation while their case is being assessed, and also in a way that is as affordable as it can be to the council. I do remember, I hate doing this, but looking back in the past, I remember, I think it was about 1987, 1988, I was the chair of the old housing committee, and I had the job of opening up a hostel in Ifield, what's the name of the place? Apple Tree Farm. Yeah, and it got some great publicity at that time, even though at that particular time there was another section of the population who were frequently made homeless, who were being scapegoated for that. But, you know, we do take our responsibilities very seriously. We do try and do what we can, the best for everybody all round. And I'd just like to say that, you know, as far as temporary accommodation goes, our responsibility is to house our residents in Crawley who unfortunately, for whatever reason, have been made homeless. That's a statutory obligation, and also, I believe, it's a moral obligation, and it's one which we will continue to do to our best ability.
Thank you, Councillor Irvine. Any other councillors? No, thank you. Well, I thank the Cabinet members for their comments tonight. I think in conclusion, before I move the recommendations, I'd just say that where I feel a great deal of satisfaction is that we've maintained in this year something, and I think it's an achievement, that we've maintained what residents told us were their priorities when we consulted on this, and we have delivered a solid financial result. And in the meantime, we've been externally recognised by the Regulator for Social Housing, the Green Flags Awards, which included an additional park this year. We were the RTPI's South East Planning Department of the Year. We also successfully got accreditation with the UK and Irish Zoo Federation. So it's not just that we recognise our own excellence, but it's increasingly recognised by others externally as well. I think that's a real feather in everyone's cap. So thank you for that. I would move that the Cabinet approves the recommendations as set out in 2.2 on page 133 of the agenda pack. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Noas. Is that agreed? Thank you, Cabinet. Item 10, we will move on to consider the 2025 to 2026 Budget Monitoring Quarter 1 report. I am to present. Some of what I'm about to say, Cabinet, may well sound familiar. It will to anyone who was at OSC as well, but as much of this is a continuation of the themes in the previous item discussing last year's finances. The net projected overspend for the quarter has been £476,000 after adjusting for the £300,000 investment increase. The major overspends are much as they were. The investment properties, we continue to incur the void costs for Ashdown House, I mentioned earlier, until the works to repair the building begin. This is forecast at £350,000 and includes necessary spend to keep the plant within the building running, as I mentioned before. Temporary accommodation, homelessness again continues to be significant pressure on the budget, and our projected variance is a further net £464,000, which is expected to be offset by the additional grant income. In terms of additional incomes, an additional £300,000 is forecast in investment interest, a result of the longer term deals that are locked in. However, we're not sure how long we can defy gravity for. We have a good track record, but the continuing drop in interest rates and forecast capital spending will make it challenging to do as well as previous years. We did, on the extended producer responsibility grant, the final allocation for this grant gave the council a further £106,000 above the previously advised figure, and the national insurance grant, the final grant determination came in at £244,000 from the government, which is £44,000 over the budgeted amount. As far as the HRA is concerned, the forecast overspend is £156,000. This is driven mainly by the disrepair claims, but that's been offset by the HRA's share of the additional interest that's been generated on investments. As far as the capital programme is concerned, this is probably the major new area in terms of things that are proposed. There's no overall change in the spend, but there are a couple of amendments that we want to make in a supplementary estimate. The Crawley Innovation Centre, we propose making a £646,000 environment from the Towns Fund for unforeseen work, and to establish a working capital budget for the managing operator to maximise the offering at the centre and thereby revenue generated. We're immensely proud at this council of what has been achieved and the potential for the Innovation Centre. It's worth the investment, and this will help us to grow the activities there and continue to have the centre on a firm footing going forward. The play schemes, 6 new play schemes, improvements of £489,000, funded by Section 106 and SIL money from developers. This coming year will see well-deserved investment in play areas in Tilgate, Northgate and Ifield, but we are conscious of others for future years, and these will be reviewed in the very near future, won't they, Councillor Mullins? But in terms of the housing management system, we have a supplementary estimate of £79,000 for Phase 2, being new modules to enhance use and deliver additional benefits. This is a large, ambitious system, and IT projects often run over estimated budgets, but we are confident that this is the end of it. As far as the general fund reserve is, the opening balance of 4.177 million with a forecast closing of 3.93 million, which is still well above the 3 million minimum. Again, just to stress, this is well over £1 million higher than the original estimates. And the HRA reserves, again, the HRA working balance remains at a prudent £5 million. And the Treasury Management, all Treasury Management activities undertaken during the quarter complied fully with the principles in the Treasury Management Code and the Council's approved Treasury Management Strategy. So I will bring in Councillor Russell to present the Commission's comments.
Okay, thank you. And as always, you have a summary of the comments there. The key issue is that the Commission did note the overspend that was acknowledged and the reasons were explained, and as you can see, as explained, they were minuted there. And I think probably bullet point 3, the OSC did press the issue of consistent under budgeting with regards temporary accommodation. It was explained to the Commission it's a demand-led service. It's understood it's a very complex issue that it's complex in order to forward budget for that. But it would be amiss if I didn't bring that or highlight that element of the discussion for the Cabinet. So that's essentially it, and you can see the other points there.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Councillor Crowe.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, firstly, I'll just start by saying that I recognise the challenges that local government per se, and indeed, of course, this council faces with the financial challenges going forward. I'll start under section 5, the excuse me, the general fund, and we've got a table here, 5.1, and I see we've already forecasting an additional £300,000 in investment interest, and indeed that's to be welcome. But I also note that no one answered the question that I posed at the previous item about when it became known that we were going to get an extra 1.9 million interest over the financial year. So maybe I'll have to go back for the previous budget monitoring papers. I've not had a chance to do that yet, but I could perhaps do that. That, thankfully, though, does help reduce the forecast that we have to under £500,000. And I can see that one of the projected overspends does relate to Ashdown House, and there have been additional costs associated with that. And I just hope that officers and cabinet do keep it under review as to what is best for this council in terms of Ashdown House, whether it is best to keep it and to do it up and to seek to rent it out, or indeed whether a sale would be more preferable. So I do hope those calculations do continue to be done, but it could be, of course, that a sale could be better if money is invested first as well in terms of the building. But obviously, I want whatever is best for the council and what the income or indeed capital receipt it could potentially gain from Ashdown House. I will also reference at the top, near the top of page 165. I welcome that a settlement was reached with the unions, and in some ways, perhaps we got off a little bit lightly that it's a 3.2% pay increase, and we budgeted for 3%. So the overspend is only 43,000, which in the scheme of things it could have been a lot higher. And actually, I am quite surprised because the unions have agreed to what is now a below inflation pay award, because inflation has now risen to 3.8%. So maybe their faith in the government to control inflation was perhaps a little bit too generous. But that's been settled, and that is good all round. That is done, and that the overspend is not going to be too much on that. I always thought it'd be quite a bit more than 3%, to be honest. Going on to page 167 and the planning and economic development portfolio, I welcome the ongoing benefit that this council receives from the Towns Fund that was awarded under the previous government, and the money going into the innovation centre. And then finally, what I don't see, and I'm used to seeing this at the county council, I don't see any sort of forecasts for realisation of savings for the year as to how, what are the thoughts as to how likely the savings that we made in the budget back in February are going to be realised this year, given that there have been some changes to, some of them are welcome, in terms of parking policies, where we were looking to receive additional, quite a bit of additional income. And there are indeed other policies that were agreed at the council at the budget back in February, such as the income from littering fines. I don't see anything in this report about forecasts for the realisations of those savings. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. Regarding investment income remaining higher than expected, I believe the head of finance has noted this in previous reports. So would you like to just clarify on that point, Caroline?
Yes, of course, Chair. Apologies if we have to go back a report, but on page 149 in the appendix, you've got the investment interest forecast, which would be in the quarterly reports. Quarter one, we forecast 816,000 favourable. At that time, we were still expecting interest rates to go down at the rate forecast by the Office of Budget Responsibility and our Treasury Management advisors, as well as, well, basically the city analysts. It didn't happen. So when you look at Q2, the forecast went up to 2.167 million. Also, what starts going into those figures at that point is you get a better idea of slippage. So you can see it going up significantly, which was explained at the time. Q3, it dipped slightly because we thought interest rates were finally going to go down. And Q4, it goes back up to 2.4. And the reason it goes up in the final quarter is we managed to get some better deals, and we chose to go long, which turned out to be a very, very good way of investing our money. And we actually beat the sort of local authority benchmark quite significantly. And the other reason you can't forecast it precisely is the HRA general fund split. We don't know for certain until the end of the year who gets what. So, yeah, I think, I mean, as the head of finance, I'm happy with the forecasting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Just before I open it up to debate with the other cabinet members, just to cover another point that was made. Just to reassure Councillor Crowe, the cabinet considered all the options on Ashdown House and decided that the economic development of the borough and the health of the town centre was more important than a quick property disposal. And there was a full discussion about this at OSC and support for the council strategy, as I recall. So I just, you know, I'd also say I think that our staff deserve the pay award that they got, and I'm pleased they got it. So in terms of the forecast of realisation of savings, I suppose that's the only other one I might like to ask Caroline to comment on.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Chair. I took the view, and it was me, that it was too early in the year, so we're going to have a comprehensive update in Q2, which, I mean, as you remember, we were working right up until the wire to decide those savings. So we're still having to do some calculations. I mean, there's nothing in there that indicates that we're going to be far off the mark, but I didn't want to be too speculative in Q1. And also the other thing that we're going to be including in the next quarter is a sort of a monitoring of key income, because obviously one of the areas of savings was income, and you've got to be really careful about and I always get this wrong, is it income elasticity, where, you know, you put your prices up too much and you lose customers. I mean, at the moment, things are looking fine, but I did want to see how the Q1 went before we started reporting.
Thank you very much. In that case, I'll now open the debate for other cabinet members. No, I think everyone's happy. In that case, I move that the Cabinet approves the recommendations as set out in 2.2 on page 163 of the agenda pack. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Nawaz. Sorry, next time. I've looked in that way several times, councillors, but on that basis, is that agreed? Thank you. Right. We'll move on then to item 11 to consider the Treasury Management Outturn 24-25 report, and for me to present again. The Council approved the Treasury Management Strategy alongside the budget in February. At the end of the year, we're then required to produce an annual Treasury Management review of activities and the actual prudential and Treasury indicators for the year just gone. I'm pleased to say that this report confirms compliance with the Council's Treasury Management Strategy and policies as approved by members. Capital expenditure was fully financed and therefore no borrowing was required. The Council received an average rate of 5% from its management of its day-to-day cash flows, Treasury investments, despite falling interests during the year. This exceeded the average rate achieved by other local authorities. The rate of return was 5%. So this is an exceptionally good result once again, for which I express my thanks to the team for their achievements once again. Vicky, in this case, always feels bad that Kerry Manger doesn't get a mention, so I'll mention him now, so he can look it up on the webcast and see that credit was given to him as well. So in that case, the council also has non-treasury investments, which are its commercial properties, and these achieved a rate of return of 4.26%. Annex 2 shows we have a number of good deals locked in that continue into the current year. Investment strategy focused on security and liquidity and yield in that order as required to keep our cash safe. On that basis, I will bring in Councillor Russell to present the Commission's comments.
Comments are listed in the supplementary sheets that you have. They're not hugely detailed. I think the key thing is that the OSC recognised, again, the excellent work that's been done by the finance team and the really, really good outturns that were being produced that you've already mentioned yourself, but also the super long-term deals that have been hooked into. So that's it, essentially. It was a well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. I've lost my page. I'll now open the debate for other Cabinet members. Councillor Hilton.
There's been lots of talk about investment income tonight, and I would like to congratulate the team. I think it's a good balance between getting a good rate of return and being quite cautious of our risks as well. And I think it's coming to fruition now, and long may it continue. Obviously, there's other various factors, and I'm just a bit surprised that I think it's the third time we've mentioned it, and I think Councillor Crowe mentioned it a couple of times, but it was there all along what the projections were, and there's no surprises to me how well we've done, because it was there in black and white in previous quarters. So congratulations everyone, and hopefully it will continue.
Thank you, Councillor Hilton. Councillor Sue Mullins.
Just to echo what Councillor Hilton's just said, it also shows that at the beginning of the year there were a lot of comments from Councillor Crowe about our investment policy and how maybe we should be investing in other areas which would bring us a much higher return. But it's just, I think the year has proved that having an ethical policy still means you can get good returns on your investments, and we don't need to invest in what I would call rather dodgy things, or things that maybe our residents wouldn't be very happy about. So I think the proof of the pudding has been in the eating, and that we've shown Councillor Crowe that an ethical policy is the right way to go for this council and for its residents.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Mullins. Right. In that case, I don't see anyone else looking to indicate. I think we've had a good discussion. So I move that the Cabinet approves the recommendations as set out in 2.2 on page 187 of the agenda pack. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Hilton. So I didn't know. In that case, move to the supplemental. Oh, sorry. Yes, of course. Is that agreed, Cabinet?
Agreed.
Thank you, Cabinet. In that case, supplemental agenda. There is no further supplementary agenda, so with the business of the Cabinet concluded, the meeting is now closed at 20:29. Thank you very much. And we'll just be a brief pause while the webcast concludes. And in doing so, may I wish everyone who's watching a very pleasant evening. Or indeed, whatever time of day if you're watching this back on the webcast.